The film begins in darkness, the sound of an old projector whirring faintly in the background. Slowly, flickering black and white footage bleeds onto the screen. A young couple, dressed in their finest, standing in front of a city park bathed in late summer sunlight. The man is tall, wearing a perfectly pressed suit, his tie knotted with precision. The woman, graceful and poised, wears a modest yet elegant dress, her gloved hands holding a small bouquet of freshly cut flowers. They are smiling, the kind of smile that belongs to a moment meant to be preserved forever. But there is something beneath it, a stiffness in their gaze, a weight behind the joy. The film pauses mid-frame, and the camera begins a slow, deliberate zoom into the image. Behind them, faint but undeniable, something dark stretches across the pale gravel path. It is too sharp, too defined, and, most unsettling of all, it leans in the wrong direction, casting no respect for the angle of the sun. As the zoom closes in, the faint outline of the shape becomes clearer. It is not the shadow of a passerby, nor does it match the silhouette of any object nearby. It is elongated, almost human in form, yet subtly wrong. The head tilts unnaturally to one side, as though studying the couple with silent, cold intent. A ripple moves through its form, not like smoke or mist, but like heat rising from hot stone. Except the day is cool, and the wind is still. The voice of the narrator enters for the first time, low and deliberate, as if speaking directly into the viewer's ear. In 1939, they looked into the camera and smiled, but the shadow standing behind them was not their own. The sound of the projector hum deepens, as if in response, while the image wavers slightly, the shadow flickering at its edges in a way that feels alive. The frame freezes completely now, the grain of the film etched into every detail. The narrator continues, his tone dropping to a hushed warning. Historians said it was just a trick of the light, but when this photograph was restored in 1978, something else appeared. The picture sharpens, revealing arms, far too long, hanging low at the figure's sides. The head remains tilted, but now the faint suggestion of a face emerges in the blur. Not features, but a presence, a darkness where light should be. Without warning, the image cuts to black, replaced by yellowed newspaper clippings. Headlines flicker past. British couple missing in Warsaw. No clues in Whitford disappearance. Hotel room left untouched. The sound of typewriter keys rattles in the distance, the clippings shifting like shuffled cards. The narrator's voice returns, steady but heavy with inevitability. Weeks after this photograph was taken, they vanished. No body was ever found. No trace was left behind, except the picture. The screen erupts in static, and with it, a rapid-fire montage begins, grainy photographs from different eras and places. A soldier in 1914, a factory worker in 1923, a smiling tourist in 1952. Each is frozen mid-laughter, mid-life, and yet, in each frame, in the distance, blurred but undeniable, stands the same impossible shadow. The montage ends abruptly. Silence swallows the room, and in that void, the final words arrive, slow, cold, inescapable. And every time it appeared, someone disappeared. The screen fades to black. The last thing left is the faint hum of the projector before even that is gone. The grainy photograph fades from the screen, replaced by sweeping black and white images of Europe in 1939. Crowds bustle through market squares, children run between horse-drawn carts, and street performers entertain groups of curious onlookers. Jazz melodies drift from open cafe doors, mingling with the sound of tram bells. It is a world still breathing in peace, but unknowingly standing at the edge of a cliff. The narrator's voice glides over the images, steady and measured. It was the summer of 1939. Europe was on the brink of war. Armies moved in silence. Governments exchanged threats. And in Warsaw, two young newlyweds arrived, hoping to begin their life together far from the tensions back home. The camera settles on a restored image of Eleanor and James Whitford, smiling, full of promise, their luggage at their feet. The voice continues, they were part of a cultural exchange program, a celebration of art, music, and unity. But history would remember their names for an entirely different reason. The screen now shifts to scenes of Warsaw's Saxon Garden, its fountains glistening under a warm August sun. Couples stroll lazily along gravel paths, children feed pigeons by the benches, and the leaves rustle softly overhead. It is here that a local street photographer, Marek Nowak, sets up his wooden camera tripod, adjusting the black cloth draped over its frame. We hear his voice, recorded decades later, faint with age but sharp in memory. I always check my negatives, every frame, but that day, there was a third figure. It wasn't there when I pressed the shutter. The camera pans slowly across a faded photograph of Marek as a young man, his eyes squinting against the sun, then cuts to his gnarled hands holding the original negative between trembling fingers. The date at the bottom of the frame reads, August 21st, 1939. The next scene is vivid. Eleanor adjusting her hat in the sunlight, James leaning slightly toward her, whispering something that makes her laugh. Marek crouches behind his camera, the shutter clicks, and for a brief instant everything is still. Then Eleanor's expression falters, her eyes drifting past Marek toward something just over his shoulder. She later tells James she felt as though someone was standing directly behind her, close enough to breathe on her neck. James laughs it off, teasing her about the tall man in the hat they'd glimpsed earlier near the park entrance. But when Marek develops the photo that evening in his small, dimly lit darkroom, the truth is far stranger. There is no man in a hat. There is no face at all, only a shadow impossibly defined against the light, standing so close to the couple it almost touches them. The narrator's voice softens, the background filled with the faint sound of a dripping tap from Marek's darkroom. The shape was too sharp to be an illusion, too solid to be a trick of the light. It leaned slightly toward the couple, as if listening. Marek stares at the print for a long time, his cigarette burning down to ash between his fingers. The camera moves slowly over the developed image, revealing the elongated arms, the wrong-angled shoulders, the head tilting toward Eleanor. Marek considers throwing the print away, but something, curiosity, perhaps fear, makes him keep it. He places it in a small envelope, sealing it with a trembling hand. The next morning, James and Eleanor receive the photograph. They are seated at a cafe table, steam curling from their coffee cups. Eleanor stares at the picture for only a moment before setting it down sharply, her expression clouding. "It's ruined," she says, pushing it toward her husband. James picks it up, studies the strange darkness behind them, and lets out a small laugh. "It's just a shadow, Ellie. Nothing more." But he slips the photo into his jacket pocket instead of discarding it. The couple continue their day as if nothing happened, strolling through markets, visiting museums, but Marek notices them looking over their shoulders more often now. As the days pass, subtle unease creeps into their trip. The narrator describes it over muted scenes of the Warsaw streets. They began to notice people lingering near their hotel, men who didn't seem to be waiting for anyone, strangers who turned away when looked at directly, and sometimes, the same figure appearing more than once in the same day, in different parts of the city. Eleanor writes in a postcard to her sister back in London. "The city is beautiful, but something here feels wrong, as though the streets themselves are watching." The camera lingers on the neat, looping handwriting before cutting to James sitting alone in the hotel lounge, absently touching the envelope in his pocket. That night, as rain taps softly against the window, Eleanor wakes suddenly and sits upright in bed. She tells James she thought she heard someone walking in the hallway, slow and heavy, stopping right outside their door. James listens for a moment, hears nothing, and tells her to go back to sleep. But in the dim light from the street lamps outside, Eleanor can see the shadow of the window frame on the wall, and another shadow beside it, taller than James, unmoving. She blinks and it is gone. She says nothing. The voice of the narrator grows quieter now, almost as if not to disturb something listening nearby. In the week after the photograph was taken, the couple spoke less and less of their strange feelings, but they could not escape them. The shadow was in their minds, in their dreams, and soon, it would no longer remain in the background. The screen fades slowly to black, the faint sound of footsteps echoing just before the scene cuts away. On the evening of August 28th, a week after the photo was taken, Merrick spots the couple again, this time at the central train station. The war's shadow is creeping closer. Soldiers patrol the platforms, their boots echoing against the iron and glass canopy. Eleanor and James stand together, clutching their luggage, scanning the crowd. Merrick lifts his camera instinctively and freezes. In the reflection of the station's tall glass windows, there it is again, the same elongated shadow, standing just behind them, though nothing occupies that space in reality. It does not move. It does not turn its head. Merrick lowers the camera slowly, his breath shallow, watching as the couple board their train. But moments later, an announcement blares through the station. The train is delayed indefinitely. The couple disembarks, walking away in the opposite direction, their faces pale, their steps unsteady. Merrick follows at a distance until he loses them in the crowd. In the days that follow, the tension in Warsaw thickens. German broadcasts crackle over the radio, and whispers of invasion fill the cafes. Yet even amid the fear, something darker seems to cling to the Whitfords. Guests at their hotel recall seeing them return late at night, glancing over their shoulders as if expecting to be followed. One maid claims she found a sheet of paper in their room with a single line written over and over. "It stands too close." James appears gaunter now, his eyes hollow, while Eleanor avoids being photographed entirely. On August 31st, Merrick walks past the hotel intending to check on them. But the room door is ajar, the suitcases neatly packed by the bed, the photograph missing from the envelope on the table. The couple is gone. No one saw them leave. No one saw them again. The morning of September 1st, 1939, dawns under an ashen sky. The air is heavy, the city unnervingly quiet, until the distant rumble begins. At first, it is only a vibration in the cobblestones. But within minutes the sound swells into the rolling thunder of artillery. Germany has invaded Poland. The cafes close, market stalls are abandoned, and shopkeepers board up their windows as columns of smoke rise on the horizon. The Whitfords are among the crowds pouring into Warsaw's central station, clutching their luggage, desperate to escape. Eleanor's hair is pinned neatly despite the chaos. James's jaw is set in grim determination. They move quickly toward the platforms, but a harsh announcement blares over the loudspeakers. Trains are delayed, tracks blocked. People press against each other, shouts and cries echoing off the glass and steel. It is here, amid the confusion, that Merrick Nowak sees them again. He lifts his camera instinctively, framing the scene, and freezes. In the reflection of the train's long, curved window, a tall, blackened figure stands inches behind the Whitfords. In reality, the space behind them is empty. Marek's hands tremble, the shutter half-pressed, but he lowers the camera, the air in his lungs turning to ice. The narrator's voice cuts in over a slow dissolve to an archive room decades later, its walls lined with drawers of photographs. For years, this image would haunt Merrick. But only later did researchers discover it was not unique. The camera pans across a table where black and white photographs from different eras are spread out like evidence in a case file. A group of soldiers in 1914, posing in the mud of the Western Front. In the far left corner, a distorted shadow that does not match the sunlight. A factory worker in 1923, smiling on her lunch break. Behind her, the blurred outline of something too tall to be any colleague. A tourist in 1952, holding an ice cream in front of a seaside pier. A smear of darkness at the water's edge, the suggestion of a head turning toward the camera. In every image, the figure is never quite the same. Sometimes thinner, sometimes broader, but always wrong. Always blurred at the edges, as though it were caught mid-movement when the shutter closed. And always appearing in photographs taken days or weeks before the subject vanished. Back in Warsaw, the Whitfords have taken a room in a smaller, cheaper hotel. The war has choked the city. Rations are scarce, and the sound of distant bombing drifts in with the night air. Eleanor writes by candlelight in a small diary, her handwriting tight and slanted. "I dream of it every night. It stands by our bed, but the room is too dark to see its face. Sometimes, it leans close, so close I can feel its breath. She closes the diary quickly whenever James enters. He, in turn, has grown silent, almost skeletal from lack of sleep and food. The man who once teased her for worrying now avoids her gaze, his mind fixed on the envelope hidden deep in his suitcase, the photograph Merrick took. The days pass in an oppressive blur. Outside, the city is no longer bustling but broken. Trams overturned in the streets, soldiers marching in pairs, citizens disappearing into the shadows of alleys. Inside their hotel, the Whitfords speak little, the air between them thick with something unsaid. Eleanor watches the window constantly, convinced she will see it there, on the street below. James keeps the curtains drawn tight, even in the day. One evening, a knock sounds at their door. It is Merrick, his face pale, eyes darting to the hallway behind him as if expecting something to follow. He steps inside quickly, urging them to pack their things, his voice a harsh whisper. "You have to leave now. I've seen it again." Outside, watching the building. But as he speaks, his gaze shifts to the photograph lying half-exposed in James's suitcase. Merrick picks it up without asking and stares, as if looking for an answer in the grain of the film. The tension breaks when Merrick returns to their hotel 2 days later to find the door ajar. The couple's belongings are still there. Clothes folded neatly, suitcase half-zipped, but no sign of Eleanor or James. No signs of struggle, no note. The air in the room feels wrong somehow, as if it has been disturbed. On the nightstand, Merrick notices the diary, open to a fresh page. The last entry is scrawled in a hurried, uneven hand. "It's closer now. I think it will come tonight." Merrick backs away, closing the door without touching anything else. He goes to the police, who assure him the couple boarded a train heading east. But no passengers recall seeing them, and no such train is ever confirmed to have departed. The Whitfords vanish from all records after that day. The narrator returns, his tone now colder, almost resigned. Merrick would never see them again. But the shadow, it would not rest. The final images in this act are of that same dark figure appearing in photographs taken long after 1939. A 1966 school portrait, where one child's seat is inexplicably empty the next day. A wedding in 1974, the groom gone within a week. Each time, the figure stands in the periphery, blurred, patient, waiting. The montage ends with the 1939 photograph once again, the shadow looming over the Whitfords, and the sound of the train station loudspeaker fading into static. In the months that follow, Warsaw falls under full occupation, and the war swallows the city's records along with countless lives. Merrick keeps the photograph hidden in a locked box, telling no one about what he saw that day at the station. But even in the chaos of war, the image refuses to fade from his mind. Sometimes, in the half-sleep of exhaustion, he swears he can see movement in the photograph, the tilt of the head shifting, the arms lowering just slightly, as if the figure within is adjusting its stance. Once, during a late-night blackout, Merrick wakes to the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps in the hallway outside his apartment. He does not open the door. Years later, long after the war ends, Merrick finally shares the photograph with a historian friend, hoping for a rational explanation. Instead, the man grows pale as he studies it. From a locked cabinet, he retrieves several other photographs, decades apart, different countries, and lays them side by side on the desk. The similarities are undeniable. A blurred silhouette, tall and watchful, always lingering in the periphery, always before a disappearance. Merrick leaves that meeting with a terrible realization. Whatever had followed Eleanor and James out of the park in August 1939 had been here long before them, and it had never stopped. The year is 1978. In a small Warsaw archive, the air smells of dust and aged paper. Dr. Helena Drobik, a meticulous historian specializing in pre-war photography, leans over a light table. Spread before her are rolls of fragile negatives from 1939, recently unearthed from Merrick Nowak's estate. Among them, one strip catches her attention, the Whitford photograph. She threads it carefully into a modern enlarger, her fingers steady, her breath held. Slowly, she increases the exposure, coaxing the details out of the grainy film. At first, the familiar blurred shadow emerges behind Eleanor and James, but as she adjusts the contrast, it sharpens. The blur becomes form. The form becomes a presence. Long arms stretch almost to the ground, the head angled as though leaning forward to listen, and the legs end in nothing. No shoes, no ground, just air. Dr. Drabik sits back, her pulse loud in her ears. This is no trick of the light. She takes another print, enlarging it further. With each increase, the thing's proportions grow more unnatural. The fingers too long, the torso slightly bent as if mid-step toward the couple. The faces of Eleanor and James remain frozen in their summer smiles, oblivious to what stands inches behind them. Dr. Drabik feels a chill, though the archive is warm. She removes her glasses and stares at the photo under the lamp. It is not simply a shape. It feels aware. Days later, unable to quiet the unease gnawing at her, Dr. Drabik digs through military archives housed in a restricted section of the National Library. After hours of searching, she finds a thin, dust-caked folder from 1914, a year already heavy with history. Inside are black and white photographs of soldiers posing in trenches, in camps, in town squares before deployment. In several of them, just at the edges of the frame, stands the same blurred silhouette. The descriptions in the accompanying report are clinical but unnerving. An anomalous man-shaped figure observed in multiple exposures. No corresponding witness accounts place any such person at the scene. One entry is more personal, a scrawled note from an officer. The men say the shadow comes before the missing. They whisper it waits. Dr. Drabik feels her hands tremble as she turns the final page. There, in looping ink, someone had written two words in Polish. Cien Jesu, the shadow of time. Local legend, the note explains, claims it is neither ghost nor man, but a harbinger. A silent witness that arrives before great loss, marking those who will soon be taken from history. By the time Dr. Drabik returns to her apartment, the sun has set. She places the restored photograph of the Whitfords on her desk, beside a small lamp. It almost feels wrong to keep it in her home, yet she can't bear to leave it locked away. That night, she dreams of standing in the Saxon garden, camera in hand. The air is still, the park empty until a figure steps into the frame. It tilts its head, impossibly slowly, and she wakes with a start, drenched in sweat. The next morning, she makes one final copy of the restored photo for the archive. As she feeds the negative through the scanner, she notices something she hadn't before. On the far left, past Eleanor's shoulder, part of the shadow's face is visible. Not a blur, but a smooth, featureless void, like a hole in the world. She zooms in until the pixels dissolve into noise, but the absence is undeniable. She realizes, with a cold clarity, that this thing does not belong in the photograph because it does not belong in any place we know. The documentary closes with the restored 1939 photograph on screen. The camera pushes in, slowly but relentlessly, toward the black figure behind the smiling couple. The closer we get, the less human it seems, until the frame is filled only with darkness. A faint static crackles in the audio. Then the voiceover returns, low and measured. They smiled for the camera, but it wasn't just them in the picture. And if you ever see this shadow behind you, it's already too late. The screen fades to black. A moment of silence. Then, in the final second, the faint outline of a tall figure flickers in the corner of the frame, almost too fast to catch before the credits roll.